Drunk guy pissed on the Royal Guard's shoes, then got kicked where it hurts the most. A drunk man urinated on a Royal Guard's boots thinking he would just stand there, but one perfectly aimed kick left him sprawled in his own mess. Here's how it happened. Before we continue, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, as tomorrow at the same time we bring you another remarkable display of Royal Guard valor that you won't want to miss. The evening shadows stretched long across the grounds of Buckingham Palace as the last tour groups filtered out through the iron gates. Guard James Matthews stood at his post, his ceremonial rifle held with perfect precision earned through years of military service. His scarlet tunic remained crisp despite 12 hours of duty, each brass button gleaming in the fading light. The sound of breaking glass shattered the evening's tranquility. Whoops! A harsh laugh echoed across the courtyard, followed by the unmistakable sound of some stumbling over their own feet. Bloody hell, who put that there? Dave Thompson emerged from the shadows, his t-shirt stained with beer and sweat, reeking of an afternoon spent at the local pub. He staggered across the palace grounds, leaving a trail of displaced gravel and slurred profanities in his wake. The sharp stench of cheap lager and cigarettes announced his presence before his voice did. Oi, what do we have here? Dave's bloodshot eyes fixed on Matthews's immobile form. His words came thick and heavy, weighed down by too many pints to count. Look at this proper gentleman, all dressed up like a Christmas nutcracker. The remaining tourists quickened their pace toward the exits, parental hands guiding children away from the unfolding scene. A pair of elderly couples lingered near a stone pillar, their faces etched with concern as they watched Dave's approach. Bet you're bloody boiling in that monkey suit, Dave announced, closing the distance with unsteady determination. His football jersey hung loose and wrinkled, bearing the stains of what had clearly been a rowdy afternoon. Watching the match at the pub, all these fancy clothes standing around like some toy soldier. Matthews remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with the discipline of someone who'd faced far worse than drunk football fans. His service in Iraq had taught him patience under pressure, though he doubted his commanding officer had anticipated this particular type of threat. During training, Dave circled the guard, his worn trainers scuffing against the gravel. Not very chatty, are you? He leaned in close enough for Matthews to catch the sour mix of cheap beer and cigarettes on his breath. Come on, mate, give us a smile, a wave, something for all this. He gestured vaguely at the palace walls standing around you. The evening air grew heavier with tension as Dave continued his unsteady orbit. Security cameras tracked his movement, their silent lenses capturing what was rapidly becoming more than just another tourist's poor judgment. Several passers-by had stopped to watch, their expressions a mix of concern and morbid curiosity. You know what your problem is? Dave jabbed a finger toward Matthews's chest, stopping just short of making contact. You think you're better than us, don't you, with your fancy hat and your shiny buttons? His voice carried the belligerent confidence that only comes after one too many pints, each word becoming a challenge to anyone within earshot. Matthews stood unmoved, though his senses, honed by years of military service, registered every detail of the deteriorating situation. The way Dave's right hand kept clenching and unclenching, the growing boldness in his stance, the dangerous edge creeping into his voice, all warning signs of someone about to make a serious mistake. Dave stumbled closer, nearly losing his balance as he steadied himself against a nearby barrier, his football jersey bearing the stains of a day spent at the pub watching Manchester United lose badly hung loosely from his shoulders. My mates at the pub, they said you lot can't move like proper staff. Statues, yeah. He reached out and flicked one of the brass buttons on Matthews's tunic, his unsteady finger making a dull ping against the metal. But I reckon everyone's got a breaking point, even you fancy boys in red. The remaining tourists had formed a loose semicircle, maintaining what they hoped was a safe distance. An older man with a veteran's pin on his jacket watched with growing concern, his weathered face darkening at each new transgression. His own service medals earned in conflicts most had forgotten caught the fading sunlight as he shifted his weight, ready to intervene if necessary. Hey, soldier boy, Dave's voice took on a taunting edge, words slurring together like spilled beer. Did they forget to wind you up this morning? He waved his hand in front of Matthews's face, close enough that the guard could smell the mixture of beer, pickled onions and salt and vinegar crisps from the pub. The sour breath of too many pints washed over Matthews's face as Dave leaned in closer. Maybe you need a drink to loosen up. Always works for me. Never met a problem that another round couldn't fix. A group of American tourists whispered among themselves, their cameras lowered out of respect or embarrassment. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking in a stage whisper why the man was being so mean to the soldier. His mother quickly guided him away, her face pinched with disapproval. Without warning, Dave thrust his half-empty beer can toward Matthews's face, liquid sloshing over the rim. Several Drops spattered against the guard's immaculate uniform, leaving dark spots on the scarlet fabric that spread like bloody stars. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, but Matthews remained perfectly still. His discipline, unwavering years of training held firm, though beneath his stoic exterior, every muscle had tensed for potential action. Oops, Dave snickered, his coordination deteriorating further as he attempted an exaggerated bow that nearly sent him sprawling. Suppose you'll need to get that dry cleaned. Do they even let you take these fancy costumes off, or do you sleep standing up like a proper horse? He straightened up, swaying like a tree in a strong wind. Bet you've got to ask the Queen's permission just to take a undersurn. Don't you? Some tourists began to edge away, parents covering their children's ears, but others remained transfixed by the unfolding scene. A pair of teenagers had their phones half raised, caught between wanting to document the incident and fearing what might happen next. He began circling Matthews again, his movements becoming more erratic, like a moth drawn to a dangerous flame. Look at this rifle thing, he slurred, reaching out to touch the ceremonial weapon. His fingers came within inches of the polished wood. Probably not even real. Is it just like everything else about this place, all for show? Bet it's made of plastic, like them toys they sell in the gift shop. Matthews's grip on his rifle tightened imperceptibly, the only outward sign of his growing awareness of the threat. The leather of his gloves creaked softly with the pressure, a sound lost beneath Dave's content taunts. His military training had taught him to read situations, to anticipate danger before it fully manifested. Right now, every instinct honed through years of active service was telling him this was about to escalate beyond simple drunken taunts. My tax money pays for this, you know, Dave continued, growing bolder with each unanswered provocation. His voice carried the belligerent confidence of someone who'd never actually faced real consequences for his actions. Pays for you to stand here like a bloody mannequin. He stepped closer, deliberately invading Matthews's personal space, close enough that the guard could count the beer stains on his jersey. Least you could do is give us a proper show for our money. Dance for U.S. soldier boy. The veteran in the crowd took a half step forward, his own military bearing evident in his movement. His wife placed a restraining hand on his arm, her grip tightening as Dave's behavior worsened. They'd seen this kind of situation before during their years living near military bases. It would either resolve itself, or the thought remained unfinished as Dave's antics reached new levels of disrespect. Dave's attention suddenly fixed on Matthews's bare skin cap, his bloodshot eyes narrowing, as if seeing it for the first time. That's real fur in it. He reached up, fingers grasping at the air, inches from the ceremonial headgear, his breath visible in the cooling evening air. Bet it's hot under there. Maybe I should help you take it off. Do you a favor, like. Must be cooking your brains standing out here all day like a proper mug. The security cameras continued their silent vigil as Dave's antics became increasingly aggressive, their lenses capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming more than just another drunk tourist incident. He started mimicking the guard's stance, exaggerating the stillness with drunken theatricality that made several onlookers wince. Look at me, I'm a fancy palace guard, too important to talk to regular folk, too posh to even blink. His mockery took on a physical dimension as he began marching in circles around Matthews, his movements a crude parody of the guard's ceremonial precision. Each step was exaggerated, his feet dragging and scuffing against the historic stones. Left, right, left, right. He chanted, stumbling over his own feet, and nearly falling several times, all dressed up with nowhere to go, just like them toy soldiers in the shop windows. Wind them up and watch them march. The evening had deepened, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. The setting sun painted the scene in shades of amber and crimson, matching the guard's uniform and highlighting the growing danger in the situation. Dave's behavior was drawing more attention, now his voice carrying clearly in the cooling air. Other guards in the distance had noticed their own poses remaining perfect, while their attention shifted subtly toward the disturbance. Come on, mate, he wheedled, his tone shifting between mockery and false friendliness like a radio caught between stations. You can't stand there forever, everyone's got to take a piss sometimes, right? Even the Queen's got to go sometime. He laughed, raucous at his own joke, the sound echoing off the palace walls. He swayed dangerously close to Matthews again, nearly colliding with the guard's perfectly positioned shoulder, speaking of which his hands moved to his belt, the gesture carrying a clear threat of what was to come. The metal buckle clinked ominously in the evening quiet. Maybe that's what you need, a little motivation to move, something to warm up them fancy boots of yours. Matthews remained motionless, but his military trained senses were on high alert. Every muscle in his body was ready, coiled like a spring under his ceremonial uniform. He dealt with aggressive drunks before, both in and out of uniform, but something in Dave's escalating behavior suggested this situation was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Years of combat experience told him exactly where this was heading. Still nothing. Dave's voice took on an ugly edge, all pretense of humor vanishing like the last rays of sunlight. Right, Then let's see how long you can keep up this statue act when I give you something real to think about. His fingers fumbled with his zipper, the sound seeming to echo in the suddenly silent courtyard. His intentions became horribly clear to the watching crowd, several of whom began backing away more quickly. Now time to water the Queen's garden. In it, his drunken determination overcoming any last shred of common sense or basic decency. Since you're so good at standing still, he slurred, let's see how you handle this, soldier boy. A woman in the crowd turned away in disgust, hurriedly ushering her children toward the gates. The veteran, who had been watching, clenched his fists, years of military discipline barely containing his urge to intervene. His wife's grip on his arm tightened. They both knew this had gone far beyond a simple drunk's foolishness. Always wanted to leave my mark on history, Dave announced with drunken bravado, positioning himself deliberately in front of Matthew's guests. This is one way to do it. He began to sway dangerously, barely maintaining his balance as he took aim at the guard's immaculately polished boots. Matthews remained motionless, but there was a new tension in his bearing, subtle changes that only another soldier would recognize. His eyes, still fixed forward, had taken on the sharp focus of a combat veteran assessing a threat. His grip on the ceremonial rifle shifted, almost imperceptibly, muscle memory from years of service preparing for what might come next. The first splash of liquid against leather broke the evening's tense silence. Dave had begun to whistle tunelessly as he relieved himself, deliberately directing the stream onto Matthews. His boots, the polished black leather, which had gleamed with hours of dedicated care, began to darken with the insult. Look at that, Dave crowed, his voice carrying across the now silent courtyard. Not so perfect now, are you? He continued, his act swaying slightly as he defiled the uniform that generations of soldiers had worn with pride. Might want to rethink that whole standing still business, mate. The remaining onlookers stood frozen, horrified, yet unable to look away from the scene unfolding before them. Several had pulled out phones, though whether to call security or document the impending consequences of Dave's actions wasn't clear. The evening air had grown thick with tension, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Almost done, Dave announced, apparently proud of his drunken defiance. Unless you want to move now. He laughed at his own joke, completely missing the subtle changes in Matthews's posture. The guard's stance had shifted, almost imperceptibly, his weight redistributing in a way that would have alarmed anyone with military training. The veteran in the crowd recognized the signs. He took a step back, pulling his wife with him. Years of service had taught him to read the warning signs of imminent action, and every instinct told him this situation was about to reach its explosive conclusion. Still playing statue, Dave taunted, focused on his crude act. Well, you can't say I didn't give you a chance to move. He was so absorbed in his deplorable behavior that he failed to notice the minute adjustments in Matthews's stance, the slight bend in the knee, the subtle shift of weight to the back foot. Time seemed to slow as Dave continued his drunken tirade, still releasing his stream onto the guard's boots. Guess this is why they call you the Queen's Guard, too posh to even take a proper piss. His laughter echoed off the palace walls. About to be cut brutally short. Matthews had endured insults, mockery, and harassment with the patience his position demanded, but this final desecration of his uniform, the uniform that represented centuries of service and sacrifice, had crossed a line his military training had taught him about proportional response, about measured action in the face of threats. In the split second before he moved, that training calculated trajectory, force, and consequence with lethal precision. What happened next occurred with such military precision that many onlookers would later debate whether they had actually seen it. Matthews's legs snapped up in a perfect arc, his polished boot finding its target with surgical accuracy. Years of combat training combined with ceremonial discipline in one devastating movement. The impact was immediate and profound. Dave's stream cut off mid-flow as Matthews's boot connected squarely with his groin, the force lifting him several inches off the ground. His eyes bulged, mouth forming a perfect O of surprise and agony. The remaining beer can slipped from his fingers, clattering forgotten on the stones. Oh my balls! Dave's voice had risen several octaves as he crumpled to the ground, folding in on himself like a deflating balloon. He landed with a wet splash in the puddle of his own, making his drunken bravado replaced by high-pitched whimpers of regret. Matthews's leg had already retracted, returning to position with the same ceremonial precision as any parade movement. His posture resumed its perfect stillness, as though he'd never moved at all. Only the slight swing of his bare skin cap betrayed that any motion had occurred. The veteran in the crowd coughed to hide a grim smile, his wife's hand covering her mouth to mask what might have been shock or satisfaction. Other onlookers stood in stunned silence, processing what they just witnessed. The guard's response had been so quick, so precise, that it almost seemed like a trick of the evening light. Dave rolled on the ground, clutching his wounded pride, and significantly more tender parts. His previous bravado had evaporated. replaced by the pained groans of a man learning a very expensive lesson about respect. Why he squeaked between gasps, bloody hell, why Matthews maintained his forward gaze, his face a mask of ceremonial indifference. To anyone watching it might have appeared that he was simply executing a standard guard movement, a coincidence that his boot had found such a sensitive target. The plausible deniability was as perfect as his posture. Security cameras continued their silent vigil, though their footage would later prove inconclusive. After all, royal guards were known for their precise movements, their disciplined routines. If one such movement happened to intersect with a drunk man's inappropriate behavior, well, that was hardly the guard's fault, was it? Jesus Christ, Dave wheezed, still curled in the fetal position. The evening air carried the sound of approaching footsteps. Palace security finally driving to handle the situation. Their pace was unhurried, as though they'd given the guard plenty of time to handle things his way first. The veteran nodded approvingly, as he watched Dave's continued struggles on the ground. In his years of service, he'd learned that sometimes the most effective lessons came from swift, precise responses. The guard's action had been perfect, quick enough to seem almost accidental, forceful enough to ensure the message wouldn't be forgotten. Matthews stood at his post exactly as he had before, exactly as he would continue to do. His boots, though slightly dampened, still caught the evening light. The only difference was the groaning figure at his feet, learning the hard way that some lines shouldn't be crossed, some uniforms shouldn't be disrespected, and some lessons had to be taught in a language even the drunkest fool could understand. Two police officers approached the scene, their pace deadly as they took in the situation before them. Dave remained curled on the ground, his pained whimpers providing a stark contrast to his earlier bravado. The wet patch beneath him, partly beer, partly his own doing, spread slowly across the ancient stones. Evening, sir, the older officer addressed Dave with professional detachment. Seems you've had quite a fall, his tone suggested. He'd seen similar scenes before, though perhaps not quite as deservedly earned. His younger partner moved to flank Dave's other side, ready in case their subject decided to attempt an escape, though given his current condition that seemed unlikely. Dave gasped. Still clutching his injured pride, he kicked me right in the. Another wave of pain cut off his protest, his face contorting as the full impact of his poor decisions continued to resonate through his body. The older officer exchanged a knowing look with his colleague. Did he now? He glanced at Matthews, who remained perfectly still at his post, the very picture of ceremonial discipline. Funny, I didn't see any breaking of formation, did you, Jenkins? No, sir, the younger officer replied, suppressing a smile. Just standard guard movements as far as I could tell. He pulled out his notebook, pen poised. Though I do see evidence of public urination, drunk and disorderly conduct, an assault on a member of the Queen's Guard. Dave's protests grew weaker as the officers began listing his offenses. The veteran, who had watched the whole scene unfold, stepped forward, his military bearing evident as he addressed the officers. If you need a witness statement, he offered. I observed this young man deliberately urinating on the guard's uniform. The guard maintained his position admirably. I'd say maintained position through the whole thing. Did he? The older officer's voice carried a note of approval. That's dedication to duty. That is. He turned back to Dave, who had managed to push himself to a sitting position, though his face remained pale and strained. Right then, sir, let's get you sorted out. As the officers helped Dave to his feet, his legs still shaky from both alcohol and aftermath, the younger one leaned in close. Word of advice, he murmured, quiet enough that only Dave could hear. Next time you feel like testing a Royal Guard's patience, remember, these men aren't just ceremonial, they're combat-trained soldiers who choose to show restraint. Dave could only nod weakly as they guided him toward their waiting vehicle. His swagger was gone, replaced by a wobbling gait that had little to do with alcohol. Each step seemed to remind him of the painful lesson he'd learned about respect and consequences. The veteran and his wife lingered a moment longer, watching as the police car pulled away. Proper form, that was, the veteran commented loud enough for Matthews to hear. Perfect execution, almost like a parade drill. His wife squeezed his arm, understanding the deeper appreciation in his words. The remaining onlookers began to disperse, though their hushed conversations carried tones of satisfaction rather than shock. Several nodded respectfully as they passed Matthews's post, a new understanding in their eyes. This wasn't just a man in a ceremonial uniform, this was a soldier who commanded respect not through words or movement, but through unwavering dedication to duty. In the days that followed, the incident at Buckingham Palace became a quiet legend among the guards who stood watch over these hallowed grounds. Not because Matthews had broken protocol, officially he hadn't moved at all, but because he demonstrated something far more important: the fine line between ceremony and substance. The red tunic and bare skin cap might look ceremonial to tourists, but they represent something deeper. Each guard who donned this uniform carries the weight of centuries of tradition, and more importantly, the responsibility of protecting what that tradition stands for. These aren't costumes worn for show, they're symbols of dedication earned through our rigorous training and proven. In combat zones around the world, Matthew's response that evening hadn't just been about defending his personal dignity, it was about maintaining the honor of every soldier who'd ever stood watch at these gates. From the trenches of World War I to the deserts of Afghanistan, generations of gods had upheld these traditions through their service and sacrifice. The uniform demanded respect not because of its appearance but because of what it represented. Some might question whether such swift justice was necessary, but those who understand military service know that respect isn't just given, it's earned through dedication, maintained through discipline, and sometimes enforced through action. The measured response Matthews delivered wasn't born of anger or revenge, it was a calculated reminder that behind the ceremonial facade stood a highly trained soldier, the veteran who witnessed the event. Later remarked to his wife, "People forget. These lads aren't statues, they're warriors who choose to stand still, who accept disrespect daily because their duty demands it, but every man has his line, and when that line is crossed, he didn't need to finish the thought. The lesson had been delivered with perfect precision. Just like every other aspect of guard duty for those who serve, the uniform is more than cloth and buttons. It's a testament to the unwavering dedication required to stand watch in summer heat and winter cold, to maintain perfect composure in the face of countless provocations, to represent something greater than oneself. When Dave chose to desecrate that uniform, he wasn't just insulting a single god, he was attacking the principles of service, honor, and duty that the uniform represents. Matthews continued his duties in the days that followed, his posture as perfect as ever. If his boots shone with extra brilliance during inspections, if his movements carried an even sharper precision, only his fellow guards noticed. They understood that sometimes the most important lessons about respect are taught not through words or regulations but through swift, precise actions that leave lasting impressions. In the end, the incident served as a powerful reminder. These guards stand watch not just over buildings and grounds but over traditions that have survived centuries because men like Matthews they do. Their stillness isn't weakness, it's strength held in reserve. Their silence isn't submission, it's discipline in action, and when that discipline is tested beyond reason, they remain capable of delivering lessons that won't soon be forgotten. What would you have done in Guard Matthews's position? How long would you maintain your composure in the face of such deliberate disrespect? Some might argue his response was too harsh, while others would say it was precisely what the situation demanded. Perhaps the real question is this: in a world where tradition and respect seem to be fading, how do we protect the institutions and values that have stood the test of time? The Royal Guards aren't just men standing still in ceremonial uniforms, they're living symbols of dedication, discipline, and duty. Sometimes maintaining those values requires more than just silent dignity. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Should the guard have waited for police intervention, or was this swift justice exactly what was needed? Tell us what you think about where the line should be drawn between maintaining ceremonial composure and defending the honor of the uniform. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories about the men who stand guard over not just buildings and grounds but the very principles of service and respect that our society is built upon.